We're going to bring this meeting for the Port of Bellingham Board of Commissioners for Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024 to order. Call to order, Commissioner Briscoe. We'll wait for Commissioner Briscoe. Commissioner Shepard.
Present.
Commissioner Bell is here. Now we need Commissioner Briscoe.
He's on.
Yeah, he's here.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
No.
Bobby, I bet.
Oh, you have to unmute him.
Thank you. I was saying here.
Sorry, Bobby.
Just knowing that we can shut you up with the touch of a button.
Careful what you wish for.
All right. So with that, we are going to open close the closed session and open the public meeting, and start out with our reading of the advisory committee boards. Our Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee, our BIAC, the next meeting for that is July 18th at 4 p.m. It's in person or on Zoom. If you go to in person, it is at the ARF building at 2005 West Bakerview Road. Again, that's the International Airport Advisory Committee on July 18th. And then the Marine Advisory Committee is September 10th at 6 p.m., taking the summer off. And that'll be here in the Port Administration at the Harbor Center building, and that's in person only, and that's for the MAC meeting. Now we open the session up for public comment. We ask anybody who has anything to say to the commission to please keep it to within 3 minutes. We ask that you be civil and that public comments be kept at a minimum. Respect the person, to zero actually. Respect the person's opinion. Who's at the microphone. Anybody who is online and wishes to speak, all you need to do is raise your hand and we will allow you into the meeting, unless your name is Bobby Briscoe. And then anybody here
is off too.
in the room, is anybody signed up to speak?
No.
Anybody in the audience that wishes to speak? Just come to the microphone and
This microphone?
tell us who you are. Yeah.
Thank you. My given name is Doug Ravel. My nickname is Yoshi. And the first thing I wanted to say is oneness is fundamental. That is, what we do here affects people on the other side of the world, and what they do affects us. There's no such thing as separation. And we know that because of quantum mechanics. Everything is connected and connecting with everything else. The second thing I wanted to say is it amazes me what people will do chasing after this piece of paper. All it is a piece of paper. And on a daily basis, we witness people killing each other and harming each other for this piece of paper. And the prime example is the tobacco industry. It's legal to kill people for money, and that mindset pervades our entire economy all around the world. This is a piece of paper. That's all that it is. And the idea that we can harm each other for a piece of paper or the environment is insane. It's insane. We live in a culture that is insane, that we harm each other and ourselves chasing after this piece of paper. For those who study scripture, it's called idolatry. We have made an idol of this piece of paper, and we harm each other and ourselves for this idol called money. Now, one of the reasons we do that is because we're all traumatized. We're all in pain. And we pretend we're not. And how do we pretend we're not? Well, if I have enough cash and prizes, I'll be fine. Cash and prizes, money is nothing more than a deadly drug. I continue harming myself. I continue abusing myself by chasing after cash and prizes, by chasing after this piece of paper. So what am I supposed to do instead of that? Feel my pain. And then involves crying my tears. I cried this morning for about half an hour. I'm a survivor of severe abuse. And I don't know anybody who had a perfect childhood. But we don't do ourselves any favors by pretending everything's fine, by putting a nice fake phony smile on and saying, oh, everything's fine. I'm laughing, everything's fine. Meanwhile, inside, I'm in pain. Human beings need to cry like we need to breathe air. That's how we know we're human. We cry. And if we don't cry, we do harmful things to each other and to ourselves and to the environment. I thank you all for allowing me to talk with you about this, and I wish each one of you healing from whatever ails you. Thank you.
Commissioner, I think we have a video problem. I'm not sure anyone's seen the video online. I'm getting texts that the video is not visible online.
I'm the other way around. I can see you, but I can't turn my video on so that you can see me other than what it's.
I misunderstood your text. Sorry, Commissioner.
Carrie, I think you have to allow Bobby to turn his video on.
Just like you unmuted him, you have to undo the camera as well.
Or not.
We're learning the new software.
That's okay. That's okay. Go ahead. I'm good.
Okay, anyone else in the audience wishing to speak before the commission? Anybody online raising a hand? All you've got to do is raise the hand if you know how to do that. Can somebody see if somebody is online? Okay, seeing no one else, we'll move to the consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent agenda items A and B.
Any comments, Commissioner Briscoe?
No, it was a really long list, though.
Commissioner Shepard?
No comments. Thanks.
And none for Commissioner Bell. So the motion to approve consent agenda items A and B, Commissioner Briscoe,
Yes, yes.
Commissioner Shepard,
Also, yes.
Commissioner Bell is also a yes. And now we'll move on to the presentations, the Q1 financials. Tamara.
There we are. Commissioners, Tamara Sobczak, CFO. So today I have a brief presentation on the Q1 financials. The purpose of that is to inform the commission on any significant deviations from budget. And spoiler alert, there aren't very many, hence the brief presentation. And then also I have our normal Q1 updates. So we'll get started on the financial portion of it. Looking at revenues for the first quarter compared to the first quarter of last year. 10.9 million this year, 11.4 million last year. But notice the dark pie piece is the operating, and that is very close, a little bit above last year, so that's good news. The non-operating included last year about $700,000 of the tail end of the FAA COVID funds. So that's why last year's a little bit higher. So take that out, and we're running pretty close to last year. Expenses, just a little bit of a different story. 11.8 million this year compared to 10.5 last year, and most of that is operating. And I looked through each of the divisions, and there's not any glaring division that takes up most of this. It really is across the board. And so we'll get into that. So looking at the airport first, revenues are a little bit higher than last year, not quite at budget, but very close. And then expenses are within budget, but a little bit higher than last year. And just keep in mind that at the beginning of 2023, we had 12 ARF employees, and now we have 14. So that takes care of about a quarter of that difference. And the rest is just expenses across the board.
Sorry, because we're going to see this theme over and over again. I just want to tell the commission that one of those expenses across the board that everyone sees in their departmental statement is insurance, which was up about 30% year over year.
Correct. Yeah, so on top of utilities and all of that.
And can you talk about that a little bit? Not now, but maybe at the end.
Well, I mean, this is an industry-wide thing. You're seeing it in your personal car insurance. You're going to see it in your personal homeowner's insurance, and the port is no different, except we have extensive liability policies that also went up. But all of our property insurance, our automobile insurance, all that saw those increases. And that's an industry-wide trend. It's not because of any particular claim we made.
Do we know what's driving that? Is it just inflation? Or
It's inflation, it's national disasters, and then it's replacement costs, right?
Right.
So the insurance companies themselves have operating cost increases that's inflationary driven, but then the assets they're replacing are more expensive because of inflation. And then you have national disasters that the claims are up.
Yeah, so property, we're insured for replacement value, not cost value. So as the costs go up, they're going to insure us for higher.
And that's been about 30%.
One of them, I don't remember, property was about 30%, liability was much lower, and I just don't remember which was which, but one of them was quite a bit higher. Okay, so looking at the marinas, revenues close to budget, slightly over the 2023, expenses tracking to 2023, nothing major to report here. Shipping terminal, this is our biggest variance. So the revenues were down in Q1. The ABC cargo happened in April, and we billed in April, so we'll see that next quarter. And then there's no notable cargo past June because of the construction. So I expect this slide to kind of look this way this year.
Can you tell me what the expense chart does with the absence of ABC?
So,
Does it reduce in a commensurate way?
well, you can see that we budgeted, the middle column is what we budgeted, and so we budgeted those extra expenses for ABC, and we're just not seeing that. So these are really just the normal operating expenses that we're seeing. So expenses will kind of.
Will reflect the
both.
actual,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, the revenues will go down more than expenses because you don't budget the exact same, right? You hope to have more revenues than expenses. That's the goal, anyway.
What's the hand signal for that again?
This, yeah. All right, so cruise terminal, same story. Revenues are a little bit higher, but the scale is a little bit off, so it looks like a bigger variance than it really is. Better than last year. Net income is better than last year and a little bit better than budget. So holding steady there. Real estate, I have nothing to say. It's all as expected as of Q1. Moving forward, we'll have to see how that goes. And then looking at the waterfront, we're better revenues than last year and a little bit higher expenses than last year, but still within budget. And those higher expenses from last year are really legal fees due to the issues that we're all aware of. And then our other public is meetings and events, economic development, things like that. Revenues are just where we expect them to be. Expenses are a little bit lower than budget. That's because in these divisions, we have a lot of consultants, like broadband, small cities grants that haven't been expended yet. So I don't expect this expense graph to hold steady once we start doing those larger projects. And then overhead, no variances from budget, lots of costs increasing, labor, utilities, all of that. And that leads to still a strong balance sheet. We don't see this bottom line net assets go down very often, but with those operating costs, this is not really a surprise. It went down about 500, oh my gosh, I'm gonna test my math. 500,000 over 300 million. So it's not a significant drop, nothing to be alarmed about. And then looking to our investments, we have about we have $14 million in these federal securities, earning on average 3.8% interest on an annual basis. And the balance is in our LGIP, earning almost 5.5% as of March 31st on an annual basis. So then moving to our stormwater program, both permits are in compliance. Our permit at the airport, all the sample results were within permit limits. At the shipping terminal, we had 7 exceedances, including zinc, copper, lead, and total suspended solids. All those responses will be completed on time. And then just to let you know that work on the level 3 corrective action did begin in January of 2024 as required. I just wanted to bring up, for perspective, our Q4 exceedances, there were 8. Q3, the quarter before, was 19, and the quarter before was 11, just to give some perspective on that. And then safety reports, 0 is the best, but 1 is better than 3. We had 1 injury for 12 days time loss, and I'm told that there should not be additional time loss here. And then the good news is Blaine Harbor was recertified in the START program through LNI. And finally, we had 33 new record requests in Q1, taking about 140 staff hours to complete. And as of today, there are only 3 major requests, and major requests are defined as giving the public the documents in installments because there's so many, and we only have 3 major ones open right now. So that is it for my brief presentation. Any questions? Want more detail?
Do you know what the 3 are, what
I do.
topics they surround?
I do.
Are you allowed to share that?
I am. It's a public
Please.
meeting, yes. Let's see. They are, the Cascadia News is asking about Harcourt, information on them. There's an attorney asking about the Fairhaven Marine Industrial Repair Facility leases. And then we have a concerned citizen asking about the boulder activities by McAmis.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Briscoe, any comments?
You shouldn't be muted anymore. Oh, he's muted. Can you unmute yourself, Bobby, or is it not letting you? She's gonna unmute you.
You want to give your comments through text? Commissioner Shepard? We'll come back to you, Bob.
I don't have any comments. Nice presentation, thanks.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Informative.
Is it not letting you unmute him like it did last time?
Do you have any comments, Commissioner Briscoe?
Bobby says no.
With,
There we go. It's working now. No, I don't, but nice presentation. Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you.
okay, Port of Bellingham Business Development Update. Oh, I've been looking forward to this one. Welcome.
Hello, Commissioners. Matthew Kress, Port of Bellingham Business Development Manager. I'm here to give you a business development update on the port, our value proposition, and potential new cargoes. So, the Port of Bellingham is, our value proposition is expanding the Puget Sound's offering of logistical connections to the greater U.S. and Canada, facilitating trade, reducing congestion, and reducing carbon emissions, and supporting the federal government's commitment to meet the 2030 and 2050 reduction goals. The Port of Bellingham has a skilled workforce, and we are a capable partner. The Port of Bellingham and local skilled labor are ready to assist in the cargo and terminal-related matters. Bellingham Shipping Terminal is an industry job multiplier that cascades across multiple industries: pilots, tugboats, barge workers, surveyors, stevedores, and marine trades, truckers, and the ILWU. Deep drop terminals are essential for high-paying jobs that allow families to thrive in a world with ever-increasing costs of living. We now have 48 local longshore workers. They expanded their haul, and I believe they're working on passing all their physicals right now, sometime in May, potentially. The strategic vision of BST is the Puget Sound and Vancouver ports have congestion in many commodity segments. Bellingham is a solution to these cargo interests, saving them time and money. Vessels idle at anchor awaiting berthing for extended periods of time is a loss for every party in that transaction, and Bellingham is the relief valve for this regional problem. The port is going to demonstrate that we're a capable partner, a permanent solution, by showing continuous improvement, upgrades, and a commitment to safety and the environment. The port will establish a rail connection to BNSF. The rail connection will allow the port to become more competitive and resilient. This will connect Bellingham to 32,500 miles of track, 28 states, and 3 Canadian provinces. The ultimate goal is a multi-use import-export terminal serving vessels with multiple cargoes on commercial vessels and moving vessels on the M5 Marine Highway. We have some challenges and opportunities ahead of us. Currently, the depth at BST is 35 feet. We're halfway through our dredge. The port will resume dredging in August 2024, and by October 24, publish the new bathymetry to industry and the Puget Sound pilots, with regularly scheduled soundings quarterly to establish a maintenance dredging program to maintain this depth. Rail connection, hopefully by 2026. The terminal has a limited footprint which restricts our cargo throughput and our attractiveness. Ideally, 3 unit train pickups per week or 75 rail cars per week would allow us to have more vessels called BST, generating revenue and jobs. There will be no new rail crossings proposed with this project. It will piggyback on existing infrastructure, and the port and the city are working on making all of their rail crossings quiet compliant, and we're in progress of working through that, and hopefully soon they will all be quiet crossings. I'm sure we all hear the rail horns at night, depending on where you live. And shore power. We are all familiar with the energy issues we're having, especially with the provider who's got a lot of projects they're working on, but a lot of demand. And so we're hoping through grants to electrify the terminal through various things like solar power, battery storage containers, and become our own kind of microgrid. And we're going to install industry shore power that's standard, so we can shore power the vessels while they're at berth, and so there's 0 emissions while the cargo vessels are at work. And part of this is incentives for our customers to come here and participate in environmentally sustainable programs. And so part of this is Green Marine. Green Marine, we're proposing a dockage rebate per annum if a certain percentage of their ships are within a participant. We haven't come up with that number yet, but possibly 75%. That's usually how these programs start. That's how the speed reduction program in Long Beach works and other ports. And so Green Marine aims to guide the industry towards environmental excellence by encouraging maritime enterprises to adopt concrete, measurable actions that go beyond regulatory obligations. The program, therefore, deals specifically with issues related to maritime transportation, such as biodiversity protection, air, water, and soil quality, and community relations. And then another program we're going to encourage them to participate in is Quiet Sound. It's a collaborative program to reduce noise impacts to southern resident killer whales from large commercial vessels. It's a voluntary speed reduction program for noise reduction in coordination with Canadian and United States authorities.
Matt, could you go back a slide?
Yes, sir.
For one more. For the, one more back.
Yes, sir.
For that depth, how often do you expect we're going to need to do maintenance dredging?
We have to establish how much it's going to change, and part of that is starting with soundings. So we're going to try to do about 3 soundings a year every 4 months after we complete the dredging in October. And this should allow us to see what changes we're seeing. And then we can start doing them more or doing them less. And then once we establish that program, we'll see how often we have to do maintenance dredging to clean that up. But we won't know until we see these changes.
Have we not done that in the past? It feels like it kind of all settled in and got to a point where it was just a problem and took us a while to get the dredge done to get it back to hopefully this correct depth.
Yeah, from what I understand is the port came back into the port took possession of this property around 2005. I can be corrected if I'm wrong. And there, yes.
Yeah, we had the shipping terminal all along. We got the Georgia Pacific site in 2005.
Right, sorry,
But yeah,
apologies.
on the shipping side, we've had that all along. And I think the direction of the shipping terminal has changed drastically since I joined the port when we were chasing NOAA, and you could let that silt in. So I think the direction of the port prior to me, so I'm not positive on this, but prior to me was that they were going to let it fill in until they needed to dredge it for the NOAA vessels. They weren't going to waste money dredging to the 35 feet because they didn't need that.
There wasn't the commerce to
Correct.
justify
Correct.
dredging it. Yep. Probably weren't marketing it in the same way.
Effectively, yes. Thank you, Rob. So, any more questions before I continue? Okay. Industry updates. Quarterly, I'm sending out an FAQ to about 250 companies and 250 email addresses, about 80 or 90 companies that I'm familiar with and have relationships with. And I'm updating them on what we're doing, how things are going with the dredge et cetera. And these are to our stakeholders, but also to potential clients. And so it's shipping companies that are semi-liner, which means they're going to come every month. That would be more attractive to us than having no idea what kind of revenue we're going to be able to project. And so a regular scheduled high flyer is the direction I'm looking at on that. So I'm talking to charters, I'm talking to ship owners, project companies that do this work on behalf of big companies. A lot of big companies don't have internal logistics for shipping. And so they three-party that out to like 3PL companies like Kuehne+Nagel and Geodis, DHL, and LPL projects. And then going after joint ventures with some of these people in order to gauge their interest in investing in the port. It's good to find tenants and partners that will put money into the port versus just take what they have and make money and not be a good long-term partner. So I'm looking at JVs and concessions as joint ventures. Offshore wind, had some meetings with offshore wind companies. That's kicking off around 2028, 2029. And I think it's going to take most of the Puget Sound ports working together to get that done. Too many ports have containerized, and there's not enough laydown space to really get these blades in and the modules and the components of that. So I think they're going to have a different kind of bases all over the Sound in order to execute that new business idea. RoRos, which are autos, farm equipment, industrial equipment. It's really good cargo. It lays down. It doesn't require a lot of infrastructure investment from us shoreside, and it allows us they move in, they get loaded up to trucks or rail, and they leave out. And so that can generate a lot of revenue. Heavy lift cargo, we're investing in a heavy lift area, so clearly that's something we're going after. And so we're talking to a lot of heavy lift companies. Navy vessels and science vessels, it's good port exposure, and it's money from labor thing. You can make a lot of money just have vessels laying up when you're not doing cargo operations. Local projects, Cherry Point's getting new crackers, et cetera. Why should we have those equipment go to other ports in the Sound when they should come to Bellingham? So we're already talking to them and their providers to make sure that we're on the short list to bring in that equipment on all the upgrades, especially with the green ammonia and hydrogen projects that are going on around here. And then target vessel size, they're called Handy Maxes. They're around 199 meters or 30 feet. And then that we can get about 2 of those alongside. And then for labor thing, the Panamax, the really long ones, we're talking to grain companies in Canada that need these ships outfitted before they can come into berth. And that's passive revenue for us. And it's about $28,000 every 3 days in just lay berth revenue while they outfit them to load grain, because there's no place for them to do that in Canada. They do that down in Everett a lot and down in Tacoma, and we can take that business because we're much closer for their staff to come down and inspect their vessels and go home via Amtrak or whatnot. So we're looking at that. So here we go. I have pictures after this, by the way. It's not just a dry presentation. This future cargo are bag cargos. So it's bulk cargo and super sacks or maxi bags. They're big, huge, tough plastic bags, and they're about 1.5 tons, and they would be discharged with special equipment and put in our warehouses, so there's not as much stormwater effects. Aggregates, which are loose quarry rocks. There's a lot of aggregates on the islands in the Sound, and there's a lot of construction companies, and aggregates are loose rock. And they usually test their cargo. They don't usually. They always test their cargo at site before it's loaded, so they know what they're selling to their customers, and they give the pH values of it, et cetera. So it would be good for us to be able to look at that before we could bring that cargo in. As again, I talked about RoRos, autos, but also auto processing. So they discharge the autos here, and then it generates even more jobs outside the terminal where these cars are taken for processing, which they get them ready for the market. So they put all the English language stickers on there and the equipment that makes it road legal. So this is a process. It's usually done at final destination, but it can be done at the port of discharge too. Sorry.
Can you explain what RoRo is for the uninformed?
RoRo.
Your boat.
Roll on, roll off.
Thank you.
Let me go back real quick here. And then steel products, beams, pipes, and coils. They're pretty common. We have a lot of inquiries about them, but we just don't have the depth to support it yet. So there's a lot of interest in Bellingham, but once the dredge is done, I think we're going to get a lot more activity. Project cargo, as I said, finished products for big industrial projects. And then containers, we've actually have some small specialized container companies that have given interest to the port. So here's how bag cargo works. It's special spreader bars and bags. It's typically put on the dock and then moved into warehousing. Dave and I have had discussions about, Dave Warder, Terminal Operations Manager, and I have had discussions about how to reduce the stormwater effects of any kind of cargo. And there's not a lot of concern here, but we're going to discharge these to essentially low boys or trucks on the terminal, and then drive those trucks into the warehouse and then discharge the cargo in the warehouse versus setting them on the dock and then touching them multiple times, which could potentially damage the cargo because it's something that you don't want to do during rainstorms, but also it's just better for the environment. Types of bag cargo are sugar, flour, salt, cement, grain, fertilizer, and ores. And then the bag composition is plastic, open mesh, fiber, and propylene. Aggregate cargo are rocks. They would be brought in via barges because there's no point in bringing ships in such short distances in the Sound. They would be discharged into hoppers and conveyed to the terminal. Ro-ro cargo is roll-on, roll-off cargo. It's autos, military equipment, industrial equipment, and farm equipment. And we have steel cargo. There's beams, and coils, and pipes. Then we have project cargo, which is finished cargo, as I've stated before, but it's finished heavy machinery, sensitive cargo, wind transformers, and oversized cargoes. We would do that in our heavy lift area. And then containers. We have a great Liber crane that would be really good at doing that. And so a lot of these specialized container companies are smaller, and their vessels are actually right in our target size. And they have one bill of lading, and it's all going to one customer. So we don't have to do special operations in the yard with stacking and keeping track of whose containers where. It's all one person's container. They bottle the product. They've chartered the entire ship. And so that reduces the footprint on the terminal. So this is the kind of multi-use terminal vision that we're talking about, where we always have cargo on the terminal, it's always moving, and we're not relying on one customer and their commodity to keep us in business, because what if they have a bad year? Then we have a very bad year.
And you really, you really need some rail access with that as well as that.
Yeah. Yes, it would help
component to
immensely.
that, yeah.
But a lot of this cargo is Canadian-bound cargo. So we're taking business away from
Canadian
our
ports.
friends to the north. Of course, we're so close to the border, and they're congested. That's why our value proposition is this. They're at Anchorage for 7 to 14 days, and some of these vessels are $8,000 a day. Some of these vessels are $120,000 a day and higher. So the more expensive your vessel is, the more you start looking at Bellingham, because your cargo may not be going to Vancouver. It might be going to, inland to all the Canadian provinces. And so we're right on the I-5 corridor. We're ready to go. Or they could load that same cargo to barges and take them to Surrey or Richmond. But Vancouver's a mess, so to put it lightly.
And the large rock that we're currently doing, what category does that fit into?
That's armor rock. I don't know what you would call that, but it's being used for different, things. The aggregates are used for road construction, concrete, that kind of stuff. It would be interesting because Whatcom County's building so much, and if we're bringing in our own aggregates that'll reduce the cost of construction locally, hypothetically, which will allow new housing to be built easier. So here's a quick map. If you look real to the north, Vancouver's very close to us, and so it's a prime target. So that's a rail diagram. We've got I wasn't planning on getting into this today. I forgot that was there. So this is just a rough sketch on the rail lines that would come in off the main line, which is adjacent to our terminal. 4 or 5 rail lines and straight lines we've consulted with BNSF. They're on board. They're in support of our future rail project. And so this is kind of how the mock-up would look. So, yeah.
And right now we're in for some grant
Yes,
support
we
on this?
applied for, so far, one rail grant. It was a RAISE grant. And we're doing a PIDP grant, which is due in May. And then we're doing a CRISI grant for the same for rail. The RAISE grant was really important because there's no match required by the port, so we really had to get that in. Because if we get it, then we don't have to come up with any money out of pocket. So, and we used cargo figures from all these customers we've been talking to in order to show the carbon reduction and the the truck reduction on the road based upon the commodities they would bring in once our berth was available. So, yeah,
What's the price tag on,
price tag is $17 million.
okay?
So we do want someone else to pay for it, right? Yeah.
How many acres is the terminal facility?
The total acreage, if you include the cargo support area, is about 23 acres. The terminal itself, BST proper, is 10.
But the whole thing is
23.
almost 25, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's all I really have. If you had a question, I had another appendix in here of the dredge diagram. So this is the next one. It shows you the different size vessels in here on the area we've dredged and the balance of the dredge we have to do this year. And we've got some cleanup to do on the north end, so they're not getting that until Whatcom Waterfront Phase 2. But we're going to dredge everything to the south of it. That's it.
Oh, good stuff, Matthew. That's good stuff. I like to see that. I'm glad you've been,
Commissioner
Thank you.
Briscoe, would you like to
Caleb.
ask a question?
well, yeah, 'cause nobody asked me if I wanted to ask. I was waiting. It was pretty quiet. So, it's good stuff, Matthew. And, thanks for the update. I've been wondering where we're headed there. I spoke with you a few times off and on, but this was a good update. Let us know what's happening and what we can kind of look towards in the future. Get that terminal up and going so that, we can put people to work. Thank you.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yeah, I like seeing that. You know, I think we've got a great track record. We can prove we can move complicated cargo. ILWU has been doing a fantastic job with those enormous, vehicle-sized rocks for a number of years. Difficult commodity to work with, but really being done with quite a bit of skill and keeping that cargo flowing. So I think we've got a good track record to keep building on. We have gotten a lot of questions about how is the next cargo going to be vetted to make sure that we're not getting a repeat of challenges with stormwater and neighbor impacts that we saw with ABC. What is our plan for vetting those future cargoes to ensure that they're going to meet our goals and our interests?
Yeah, I think we all agree we need to do a little better due diligence. So the thinking is that when we have a potential customer, potential cargo, we'll go find that cargo elsewhere and visit that port, talk to that port about what the challenges are. We've got a potential customer right now that we'd like one of you to come visit with us. So we'll be talking about that as soon as we can.
Okay.
But I think it's more on-site visits and then communication with other ports that handle a similar cargo.
Okay. We've talked in the past about having a review from our stormwater team in particular. Because stormwater has become so highly regulated and keeps getting more so, I think that in particular is one piece that would be good for us to have a recommendation on, is just what is this going to do to impact our stormwater? And I think we are taking some steps. We're putting in a brand new stormwater filtration system, which is going to be a big step up for us to be able to handle a pretty diverse range of cargo, but that's still a critical issue. I mean, that was one of the major critical issues from this last project that came to a head. So I just want to make sure that we are really careful about that in the future and not getting into another situation where we are in needing to make changes and address a problem that we could have headed off sooner.
I agree.
Okay.
I'm going to ask, can I get a copy of that
Absolutely.
presentation? Yeah.
Yes.
So this is the kind of thing we're asked about a lot. And just having the background on this is important for what we hear. What's the port doing? Where are we going? What kind of things are you looking at? So I appreciate that. All I need is just a copy of that, and I'm good to go. You're doing an amazing job. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You were doing an amazing job.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So thank you. All right, now we'll move to the action items.
All right. Authorize the executive director to execute a grant contract with the Washington State Department of Commerce and accept funding to develop a feasibility study on the potential for optimizing and expanding the port's downtown waterfront district energy system.
Thanks, Gary. Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental and Planning Services, and I believe the presentation will pop up here in a second. And just while that's getting pulled up, I'll take this moment that since this would have been Mike Hogan up here presenting, he's been working on this, but he had an unexpected opportunity to take an international trip and go watch some English Premier League soccer, and so I'm here presenting this on his behalf. But we're working on it really closely together, so it's good. So good for him, and it's also a really good project here. So let's see here. So yeah, here we go. So yes, this is a grant that we've received an offer to accept for a study of an expansion of our district energy system that we currently have underway in the waterfront district. And so, just as a reminder, the the district energy system. I also want to make sure I kind of clarify a couple times. This is a district heating and cooling system, so it's not a power generation system. It's a thermal energy. So sometimes there's confusion what this is actually providing, but this is for heating and cooling throughout the whole district. So. This was a system that we talked about for years as we were planning the waterfront district. District-wide utilities were studied by the city, including irrigation, non-potable water, the heating and cooling, stormwater systems. There's a whole variety of things that were looked at, and this is one that rose to the top that would be really an opportunity, given that we were starting from scratch down there. There was no utilities, there were no roads, we weren't retrofitting anything, so it was one of the systems that rose to the top of something that we should pursue. And then in 2018, when the first roads were being constructed, Granary Avenue and Laurel Street, the port took the initiative and installed the first phase of infrastructure, which included this 4-pipe system for heating and cooling. We didn't have any customers at the time. We didn't have an operator. We actually were pretty forward thinking and were out ahead of things and took a risk. But it's really started to pay off. So then in 2020, the port entered into an infrastructure agreement with Corex Utilities. We did a request for proposals and looked at a few different opportunities there. Corex rose to the top. They did a feasibility study on how that system could be operated. Been working with them closely for years. And then now Corex is the utility provider for this district thermal energy. And the first few projects that are now underway have actually started to connect to that system. Harcourt has an agreement with Corex for their buildings when they come online to connect to the system, and the Mercy Housing project, which opened last month, their hot water system is actually connected to this system already as well. So we're starting to see this system go into effect and be utilized. Just as a status update, just so you know also, so to connect those first projects, Corex installed their temporary heating facility in late 2023 so that Mercy's project could come online. And it was just a really little hut that was there. It was nothing spectacular, but that was while they were permitting their larger facility that'll be their permanent facility, which is actually a set series of Connex boxes that were constructed, kind of fits with the portal theme actually, and they were fabricated off-site. But as we've seen in some of our other prefabricated buildings, Labor and Industries has to certify that. That just took them a little bit longer. It's a process that just took a little bit longer. But those now have been completed and actually were delivered to the site yesterday. So this photo on the bottom right is them setting the first of those permanent Connex boxes that'll be the energy plant that's kind of shown there in the orange box in the middle of the location. That's really phase one. It's designed to be expanded and modified as time goes on, as demand increases, as different types of energy sources come online, as technologies change. So it's an expandable and modifiable system. So that's a big milestone yesterday, and then as they get this connected, the next piece will be in the next few weeks. They'll actually be connecting to the Puget Sound Energy waste heat recovery from the adjacent where we see steam coming off all the time, the cooling towers there. So they'll be tapping to that, and that'll be one of the primary heat sources for our district energy system. So that's all in context for kind of setting the stage that we've been doing this for years and years. And then what we worked with the Department of Commerce was to look for a grant on how could this potentially be expanded? Are there other locations other than the district, than the waterfront district? Could we expand up to Western Washington University? They're looking at a conversion from their hot water system to a steam, or their steam system to a hot water system, that this facility or a similar facility could be used for all of Western Washington University. The Old Town development is a very similar setting. Is there an opportunity there? Expanding, down Rotor to cold storage, you can scavenge heat. Cold storage and refrigeration actually generates heat that district systems can use to capture. Are there other port facilities? So we submitted that as an idea to the Department of Commerce and got a $97,000 grant to study those, to look at those opportunities. What are the challenges? What would we need to figure out? Where are there opportunities? And that's a 100% funded grant to do that. There was really strong support from our delegation. Representative Rammel also was a really big advocate for this, has been very supportive. And so with that in mind, we will then, if, pending commission approval of this, we'll start scoping the grant, probably go out for a request for proposals on somebody who could help us do this study that would be experts in this field. Corex would, of course, be an opportunity, but we'll probably have to put that out to say, okay, what are there other providers that could provide us that feedback, and that would be evaluated. So with that in mind, Port staff recommends approval of this, and we can get going on this, but I'd be happy to address any questions you might have.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yeah, I was just, one of my questions was who's going to do this work? Any of this done in-house, or besides Corex, who else is out there that has the expertise for this?
Yeah, that's one of the questions. We've, there'll be definitely there's in-house support that our staff will be working on it, but there are definitely utility experts in this field. It is a small field in the sense of thermal energy is not something that is widely used in the States yet. There's a new bill, though. I think this is, and the Washington State Energy Code has been changed. This is becoming something that's going to be more and more common. We're actually probably, again, with this study, are going to be kind of the tip of the spear here a little bit, that we'll be seeing how this can be done, how systems can be developed and maybe grow together. It's really common in Europe and other places, but I think that Corex would be, experts in this, but we want to make sure we put this out to see who else would be able to support us on that. We would also be scoping what exactly are we asking them to study. This, even though $97,000 is quite a bit, I don't know, we couldn't get into detail on all of those things. We may focus the first one on an area. So staff would probably come back with an update to the commission on where we're looking at focusing those efforts.
Does Western also have concurrent money? I feel like they got a grant to do some of the same study. So are we replicating what they're doing, or are we kind of combining these studies? How are we going to?
They did get some funding. I think part of it is probably we would work closely with them to say, so we're not duplicating efforts. So I think their study is mostly about their transition or their conversion, and this would be more like, how could we get, if this was the source, how would we get it up there? And Corex team feels like there's a pretty straightforward. It's a big project, but it's completely doable from their perspective to use this heat source area, this energy plant. Or there could be a phasing. It could all be about phasing. So we'd be working really closely with Western, and they did get funding for some studies as well.
I think the biggest challenge you're going to have with Western is acquiring the right-of-ways to get up there. Something like the Old Town development might make a lot more sense to connect that as that gets redevelopment, and you basically just have to go under a bridge, and it's right there. And then Bellingham Cold Storage, it's unfortunate that we didn't know about the sewer project going down Rotor, because we could have had a couple pipes dropped in there getting the cold storage. Yeah. But we'll be keeping our eye on that a little closer in the future, looking for those opportunities.
Yeah. To get to Western, you probably just have to dig a trench on the roads and repave it.
Right. Yeah.
Not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, it'd be a big undertaking, but I think it'd be completely doable.
Yeah. Definitely Old Town, clear opportunity there.
Right.
We don't get very many chances for new construction, density construction like that. And
we have been meeting with that team as well as the city just to see what the opportunities would be. So people are definitely watching this and are aware. So this would be a grant that could actually fund that study as well.
Are we going to see the amount of steam coming off that plant decrease if we are drawing more heat
It may be a little bit. I think actually, from what I understand, is that they're tapping into even just the temperature of the water, even after it's gone through that, is warm enough for them to pull heat off of it. So they're not really intercepting it before it gets to that cooling tower. There's a basin of warm water that sits there after the cooling process has gone through, and they're tapping into that. So probably won't reduce the steam per se, but yeah, I can get more information to see if that is the case. But it's after that process has gone through.
We were on a field trip and the kids all called it the Cloud Maker, Bellingham's Cloud Maker. Well, good. And, we had PSC in here just last meeting, I think, and, clear takeaway is we need as many clean energy inputs into the system as we can. So this is much needed. And I think that plant is going to be around for a long time, even if it eventually stops running off the same type of fuel.
Right.
I think we'll see an alternative fuel keep that plant in operation for quite some time. We just don't have enough new inputs into the system for the energy demand that we've got.
Agreed. And this is a great spot for this. This area is tucked away. It's right next to that area. It can be expanded. There's a potential for sewer heat recovery. The sewer main's right next to on Cornwall. There's lots of ways that this district energy system could be expanded to.
Great.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yeah, I got a few things there. What kind of limitations have we got on this Corex? Is it kind of unlimited, or, I know we kind of bumped heads with the city on the Mercy Housing project. We wanted to see it fully utilized there, and we got hot water, which is a start, but I was hoping for heat. Everybody thinks electric's the greatest thing since peanut butter, but you have to have some way to produce it. And it's obvious from the meeting that we had, the visitor we had at the last meeting, that we don't have it yet. It'll come sometime, but it's a long ways out. But what are the limitations? The amount of heat they can get into the system, is that the limitation to what they push to on the other end, Brian?
The main limitation that was with the Mercy project was the system was not up and running yet when the time frame that Mercy was on for their permitting. So it was not required. Now moving forward, the system is there, it's built, they can provide heating and cooling, and it's a requirement in the city code that all buildings will need to hook up to this. So Board Mill Building will, if the port builds buildings down there, we will connect. It's a requirement now. So there's not much of a limitation. Like I said, it's expandable. They've got air source heat pumps. They've tapping into this hot water. They have sewer heat recovery potential. So there's not really a limitation at this point. I think that once you get to the load, and this is getting outside my area of expertise, but you get into the specific load requirements for of a building, the Corex would need to work with that developer to say, hey, we can provide you water at the temperature you need for the uses you have, but they've mapped this out as for mixed use redevelopment. There's no real limitations for what they can provide for heating and cooling for buildings moving forward.
So then potentially they could move this into the city from down there, plummet into the city, and a lot of those big buildings in the city could have heat from it. Is that what I'm understanding?
Oh yeah, so I see the question. So yes, that's a possibility. That's part of this expansion. Most of that retrofitting would then have to be the buildings would have to coming online with probably some new systems that if they would have to install, the different internal piping, the internal kind of ducting, all the things that you would do. The opportunities we have here in Old Town is it's all new. So retrofitting would be, a consideration, but it's been done too. We've seen that done in European countries where they were all on oil tanks or whatever, and a bunch of them have gone to district systems. And then what the interesting part of that is that not just expanding this, but you can have a number of small systems that can grow together and then have efficiency. So you could even build a small system at Old Town that doesn't have to get over the bridge yet. And then, but as development happens, then you could connect those, and then they could share that system together. So there's a number of ways to address it. It's the key, from what I found, is this early planning, talking to people, getting them familiar with what this is, what the rate structures are, how they fit in with their developments. And now that we have a couple examples that are operational in town and in the States and under the Washington Energy Code, I think you'll start to see a lot more of I can see how this works, and we'll have a lot more of opportunities, which I think this grant will help us evaluate. What are those opportunities?
Okay. And I don't think, to getting into Western, they can push pipes under the road these days pretty easy. They don't have to tear the road up. It's when they go down the road lengthwise, but going up the side hill, they can push the pipes under the road without tearing the road up. So this is from what I understand. So, all right. Thanks, Brian.
Yep, thanks, Commissioner.
Informative.
Great.
I've got none. They answered everything. Thank you.
All right, great.
All right. Authorize the executive director to execute a grant contract with the Washington State Department of Commerce and accept funding to develop a feasibility study on the potential for optimizing and expanding the port's downtown waterfront district energy system.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd?
Yes.
And I am a yes.
Thanks, Commissioners.
All right.
Action item number 2.
All right. Motion authorizing the executive director to execute a consent decree for cleanup actions at the R.G. Haley International Site.
All right, this is the one I was supposed to present, so I'll.
R.G. Haley. I hope you're getting, like, he's bringing you back a meat pie or
Yeah, right,
some
right.
English pub beer.
Jersey, maybe. This is the R.G. Haley Matka cleanup site, which we've talked through a couple times in our updates. Although this is, as you'll see, is actually a city-led cleanup project. This is not one of the projects that the port manages, but because of past ownership, we do have some liability at the site, and we have an opportunity, and it makes some sense for a number of reasons, to sign on to the consent decree for the work there. So just for orientation, this is an aerial photo, and you'll see a couple things. There's a number of different pieces here, but this is down at the foot of Cornwall, right next to our maintenance shop, as you go up Wharf Street here. The R.G. Haley site is a former wood treatment facility that treated timbers for poles and cross arms, variety of different wood treatment using pentachlorophenol, and there's diesel and dioxin and pentachlorophenol contamination associated with those operations. And the footprint is typically, for the upland, is up in this area, and then you'll see another map that shows it goes out into the bay a fair amount as well. Adjacent to that is the Cornwall Avenue landfill site, which is a port-led project, but also very similar. It also has city involvement there as well. So there's overlapping. And then the third layer on top of this is this whole area from the waterfront district planning perspective is slated for a city park, the Salish Landing Park, and that's under design as well. So you'll see how all these pieces come together. But the action for you today is to enter into a consent decree for the cleanup of the R.G. Haley Matka site. So just a few bullet points to go over there. Again, just a few slides on this one. This is a consent decree with the port and city as signatories. The city would be the lead PLP implementing the cleanup under the consent decree. As part of that agreement, as with any consent decree, the signatories are agreeing to implement the ecology completed cleanup action plan. That preceded that, there was a number, just as all of these, there was an RIFS done, there was a preferred alternative, that all went out for public comment. The city then worked on developing with ecology a cleanup action plan and have been in design of that as well. And that's built us up to this point now where we have a draft or a consent decree that's ready for signatory. And that consent decree, along with the cleanup action plan, went out for public review and comment by the Department of Ecology from March to February 12th, so very recently. There was a lot of public outreach with it. It was great, really well done. Department of Ecology got the word out through advertisements, social media, their announcements, but then also partnered with the resources to do a walking tour and virtual tours. A lot of people turned out for those. I think they were really interested in the park elements of this, which is often the case. There's confusion between what's the land use versus what's the cleanup, but it got a lot of interest, and the comments were really complimentary. People were really thankful that this was happening as far as the cleanup and the land use, and even the opportunity to go out and do the tour and see what's out there. So based on that, though, only 8 comments were received. There were some of them, a lot of them were about land use. Some of them said, good work, keep it up. There was a couple comments about ABC recycling, which does not apply to this at all, but it was a forum for people to talk about that. But based on those comments, there were no changes at all to the cleanup action plan or the consent decree. So with that, Ecology has finalized those documents for signatory by the city and the port now. And this project, as you'll see, does overlap with the Cornwall Avenue landfill and the Sailors Landing Park, which will, all three of those projects will be constructed together. The cleanup of Haley, the cleanup of Cornwall, and the park development of the first phase. So here's a map that shows, this was from the fact sheet that Ecology put out that shows kind of where the RG Haley contamination is. You can see there's a lot of overlap, there's a lot going on here. The color coding is basically the pink is the upland contamination. The main source of contamination was the wood treating, and then they would have they would kind of drip dry these treated logs, which were oil and other contaminants were just coming off of them and going right into the ground, soaked into the ground. There's free product that's in that area that means like oil floating on the surface of the groundwater. That contamination also got out into the bay through stormwater, through direct runoff, a variety of different, and then a footprint of contamination associated with the site as shown here in blue. So the area kind of overlaps, as I said, with the Cornwall Avenue landfill. That's a separate cleanup that'll be done by with the port as the lead, but coordinated really closely with the RG Haley site. So this gives an idea of what the footprint of that is. The land use then has the park over the top of that. I didn't have a figure for that because you didn't want to confuse the issues because this is related to the cleanup. So. The next steps with this would be to execute and file the consent decree. From what I understand, the city has already signed the consent decree. Is that right, Holly? Is it okay? I didn't heard that today. And then the city will take the lead on completing the engineering and design. They'll incorporate any permitting requirements. We're in for permits now on all three of those projects. So the design is really about 90% the way there. We're waiting on comments from the permitting agencies, and then we'll finalize all those designs and put those out to bid. They'll plan on taking those out to bid, hopefully, but I was hoping this fall. It may be first part of next year, but we're still shooting for the end of 2024, hopefully, to have this out to bid. And then it would be a multi-year construction project. Along with that, a lot of these cleanup sites also have 30 plus years of monitoring that go along with them to make sure that they're performing. So that would be the next steps. Staff does recommend approval. We're working closely with the city team and be happy to address any questions you might have.
Commissioner Shepard?
So are these both MOTCA cleanups? So
Yeah.
MOTCA funds are being used for RG Haley and Cornwall both?
That's right. Yeah, and the city has a grant through the Department of Ecology for RG Haley. We have a grant for the Cornwall site.
And they're bringing in that 50% match
That's
like
right.
usual.
Yep.
Why are we the lead on Cornwall and not RG Haley? Did we own the Cornwall differently or?
Yeah, it was at the time. There's a kind of the ownership history more so than anything, and then also at the time. We had taken on most of the cleanup projects through the Georgia Pacific acquisition, which GP actually had a warehouse on the Cornwall site. We acquired that through the GP acquisition, then we took the lead on the cleanup there. Actually, there was a private company that owned the RG Haley site. The city wasn't even involved in that. And so we took the lead on the cleanups from the sites that we acquired through the GP acquisition. And also we had a fair amount more of experience in this. We just have done it longer. We have more sites. Unfortunately, maybe, but and then the city acquired the RG Haley site at a later date, and we were not party to that acquisition, and so they took the lead on that one. But we've been working really closely from day one on this, so that we knew these projects were going to come together at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, well, I wholeheartedly agree that we have tons of experience. These are exceptionally complex to perform, and they are extremely expensive and just really have a lot of different moving parts to them.
Yeah.
Give us ballpark figures on these two cleanups.
The Cornwall cleanup is about, I think, between 14 and 17 million, and then the RG Haley site is currently projected at over $30 million. So, I mean, the RG Haley site is one of the probably one of the most heavily contaminated sites in Bellingham Bay from a contaminant perspective. So it's a complicated, it's hazardous waste from the designation of the waste from the operations. So it's a big one.
And then do we know a price tag for the park construction after that?
I don't have that one off the top of my head. I can get back to you on that. I know they've projected that. That construction is going to be done in phases. So this first phase of work is really because the cleanups are coordinated, they want to make sure that like where the RG Haley area is, that's going to be a great spot for a parking lot, because it's like they've capping it. Let's park some cars over that, and then the rest of the area, the landfill area, will be more of the park activities. And so they're trying to capture that work that's going to go along with the cleanup. They're going to phase in work. They're going to have some trails initially. Then the second phase would be let's bring in more structures, more, all that kind of stuff. But this will be like the utilities that will serve future restrooms, maybe a concession stands, that kind of stuff. So the current dollar amount for the park is less than what the total will be when they build it out over phases. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Briscoe?
No, I don't have any questions.
I don't know, got mine done.
Okay.
Carrie?
All right. Motion authorizing executive director to execute a consent decree for cleanup actions at the RG Haley International Site.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
Commissioner Shepard?
Also, yes.
Commissioner Bell is also a yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, commissioners.
The city has $2.4 million allocated for the building of the park after the cleanups are done.
Okay.
Long time coming.
Yeah.
All right, we're at the end of our meeting. We have another time here for public comment. Anybody wishing to speak to the commission, please feel free. Just step to the microphone if you're in the room. If you are on Zoom, just raise your hand and we'll acknowledge you when it's your turn.
Hi, my name is Luke Van Hoge, and I appreciated seeing the presentation on business development. I've been a neighbor of the port since 1999, and what happens at the port impacts me directly, and as well as other neighbors on South Hill. And what I would like to see is as the port gets more of a short list of directions it wants to go for its business development, I'm hoping that you're updating and staying closely tied with the mayor and with the city council on what you're intending to do, and that what you're doing is aligned with their also their projections of what they want to do in the area. In addition, it would be my advice to also contact the city neighborhood associations and make sure that we have a little bit more insight into what the activities are, what are the operations. That way we get a sense of emissions, we get a sense of sound, and a lot of other things that are of concern to neighbors here. So if you would do that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the commission? All right, with that, other business. Commissioner Briscoe?
I have none.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yeah, I just wanted to check in, see if Rob had an update for us on the pump track. I was riding it with some kids on the weekend. I noticed it could use some refresher on some of the rutting that happens every winter. And also, it gets really buffeted by wind. I would love to see us get some more hedge or trees down there to help with some of that southern wind that comes. We were getting quite a bit of dust and material from the track just being thrown up because it's so dry, and we're really getting so much wind. So wanted an update on those things.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Regarding the maintenance of the track, it's in pretty rough shape. It usually is this time of year, and then we have a couple work parties, and we get those cracks filled in and smoothed out, so we'll get those going again. We typically hire an employee for the summer that comes in and they water it, and that keeps the dust down. Might have to start having that employee start a little earlier. We're having a little drier April than we normally do. So it's never been an issue in April before. This is the first year dust has been an issue in April. So I'll talk to HR and see what we can do about accelerating the hiring of that individual. And then I'll just get out there with some volunteers and we'll do some more watering as well. But we had a work party planned for last Friday. I bailed on that because my back was hurting. I didn't want to shovel, but we'll get a couple of those on the books.
Okay. Yeah, it's going to be a busy season there. TuneUp just released their lineup. They're bringing some fantastic artists. I think it's going to be a really dynamite event again. So it's going to continue to get lots of use, and even in its rutted stage, there were still a lot of people using it. So definitely look forward to some of those work parties and getting it freshened up. About some more semi-permanent vegetation. I know there's some complications with the soils, the cap. How possible is it to get some wind barriers that can both provide some brakes on particularly those southern winds that come up?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We could look at a few ways to do this. We could look at larger potted plants. I mean, the planting. I mean, we can plant trees down. There's there's nothing prohibiting that from like a cleanup perspective. It's just we left all the foundations down there, so getting through into the soil to get trees that I don't know how well they would survive. That would be a challenge just to look at. But there's other ways we could look at potted plants that, you can get some big pots and kind of have things like that. We've also been talking with the Paper Whale team about some other like sunshades and other things like over the grass area that could look cool. There's other ways we could look at maybe if there's kind of buffeting things, you could do it with maybe some of those tarps that kind of you can angle those in different ways. There's lots of ways we could start looking at that. And it is something that we've identified that as the redevelopment occurs down there, that weather considerations, including wind, is going to be something you think about where the public spaces want to be, and so you kind of have these little micro areas that could be kind of refuge from the wind, which is always going to happen. But and try to avoid creating wind corridors too. So it is something that people are aware of. So we can start kicking around some ideas and see what we could do.
I think there's particularly a wind corridor between the board mill and the alcohol building. And I know eventually there's going to be a parking garage there that will probably block a lot of wind, but that's a few years out still. What did the city do for their trees? Are those planted, along the road, the city put in some trees. Are those more in a different type of composition that isn't impacted by that cap? And
yeah, I think because that really what actually happened there is, they tore out everything. And so they were starting fresh, like where the road alignment was, they went through and demoed all this area under it, all the existing foundations, at least in the footprints of where they needed to be. And so it was a much larger undertaking. And then they built it back up with fill that was, appropriate for the subgrade of the road, as well as for, the rain gardens areas and the plantings. But it doesn't mean that's not something we couldn't look at. We just haven't to date had that on our radar. But something we could look at. Pots might be the way to start and see if it helps. Because even getting those established, they take years before they really would get big enough to really do much.
okay,
But
it's not just as easy as digging a hole and putting a tree.
Probably not, unfortunately.
Well, I think the key here is that the plants that are along the side of the road was built up.
Yeah.
It's higher than the rest of the site, so there's a ton of dirt there. We don't have that luxury in the rest of it, but we'll look at it and we'll get creative.
All right, that was it for me.
Mr. Briscoe?
I have nothing.
Oh, you had none. All right, mine is just really quick. Had the opportunity to go to both the Marine Advisory Committee and the Airport Advisory Committee. And my comments are, Rob, you've got two incredible leaders in those two places. That's not just feedback from me, but feedback from the people that you serve. So I thank you for your service, you two. And I also wanted to say the airport's got a lot going on. And I look forward to seeing it happen, but there's a ton of stuff on the agenda, and I think at some point, Kip, we're going to make you come and present all the things that are in our future. But both those committees are really incredibly happy with the leadership that we've got, and happy with the changes that have been made in both those places. So just happy to report back that we've got a really happy community in both those locations. Other than that, I am going to cede the floor to Rob.
Just since one more for other business, I just wanted to take the opportunity to introduce Sam Shipp, who is our new engineering program manager for the port. Started yesterday. He's going to be taking over management of the engineering team. We'll be working really closely together, but really needs to get out to see all of our facilities, learn about all the capital projects we've got underway. Sam comes to us from the city of Bellingham, previously in Public Works, and then also at Skagit PUD. So a lot of experience in public works stuff, asset management, a few other things that'll be really valuable add to the team. So just wanted to take the opportunity to introduce him and say welcome aboard. Yeah.
Welcome. Anything else, Rob? Meeting adjourned.